the Founders Lecture was instituted 22 years ago to spawn research, conversations, dialogues about the grand questions of our time. And we've been delighted to getting some of the best intellectuals in public, private, and civil society, from universities to legal practice and different sectors. And I'm very appreciative that as we were celebrating 150 years 2 years ago, I took a leap of faith to write to Professor Sachs, because at the time I was concerned about the role of UNISA in the aftermath of COVID-19. How do we ensure that our internationalization agenda, the ability to invite youth and young adults to see this model of education through UNISA is an important lever for their improvement. And therefore, I wrote to him. He wasn't available then, but he promised to come this year. So we requested him to do so. But it was also not just a pivotal moment for us to debating around geopolitics. It was because South Africa is a president of the G20. We have just come from the aftermath of COVID-19, where Africa was on the margins or did not have access to some equitable health resources that would allow us to be resilient. So university must ask these questions. How do we become resilient as a society? How do we resource governments to take the right decisions that are researched and not to borrow or mimic Euro-American or Asian resources or tools? How do we ensure that our scholars, our scientists collaborate internationally to collectively identify those tools that can help public sector, private sector, civil society sector to recognize the imperative of multilateral systems, their benefit or their contradictions? And I think this topic addresses the key experiences, the concrete experiences of the tariffs that have been imposed on Africa, including Africa's institutions. Wits University, UCT, UNISA are some of the people, when the tariffs were made, lost some funding. But it helped us to say, how do we become financially viable and independent and ensure that we're not just dependent on our state or the government to give him money? How do we take the best of talents to help us imagine and to help the youthful dividend in a continent where youth and young adults must be excited about education and transform their own lives? So we're very happy that he came. He has shared the lecture. He has been very generous, and he understands why the global north, the global south, and Asia and others must work together to transforming our world.
Thank you so much for that. You spoke about the role of the universities. How can the universities in Africa safeguard academic freedom and social justice, and in this contested global environment?
First, academic freedom for African institutions is for us to reclaim our intellectual resources, never to go into the multilateral discussions as though we are beggars. Oftentimes, the assumption is that African universities must mimic what other universities in the world are doing. No, we must use the knowledge systems, the civilizations, the sciences, and philosophies of Africa to contribute into the world, as was suggested by Professor Sachs. Two, we must ensure that universities are not just environments for teaching. There's strong research that is invested in society that changes society. There's a demand on the public sector and the private sector to take the rightful decisions that change the course of society, that contributes to the continent and its transformation. One of the critical fault lines of our context now is that people complain that the African Union does not seem to demonstrate the leadership that is required to solving poverty, the wars and battles that are happening, gender-based violence and femicide that is extensive, the needs for infrastructures, whether information or digital infrastructures for our societies, or infrastructures as homes, as institutions, as universities. And we require them to strengthen this institution so that they are strong, so that Africans compete and they're the best amongst the best.